The morning sun rose gently over the small village of Obinze, painting the mud huts in shades of gold and bronze. Children ran barefoot through narrow paths, their laughter echoing like music between the trees. Women's voices floated through the air as they fetched water from the stream, their songs blending with the rhythm of pounding pestles. Life in Obinze was simple, quiet, and deeply rooted in tradition. For generations, the people of Obinze had lived by one law: honor the elders and never question the old ways. The chief's word was final, the elders' judgment unquestioned. Silence, they believed, kept peace. But beneath that silence, truth often drowned. Among them lived a young woman named Amara, whose name meant grace. She was in her early 20s, with warm brown skin, kind eyes, and a quiet strength that drew people toward her. Amara worked as a seamstress, stitching clothes with steady hands and a thoughtful heart. She often smiled, yet her eyes carried a depth that few could understand. Everyone in Obinze knew Amara for her honesty. She spoke her mind, not to challenge, but because she believed truth was the only thing that could heal a broken world. Some admired her courage. Others, especially the elders, found her unsettling. "A woman who speaks too freely," they whispered, "is like wind stirring dust. It brings no good." Still, Amara held her head high. Her late mother had taught her that silence could be deadly, that sometimes keeping quiet was another way of lying. Each evening, when the sun dipped behind the hills, Amara would sit by the stream with her younger brother, Chaiki, watching fireflies dance across the water. "Someday," she would tell him softly, "I'll make sure truth has a home in this village." Chaiki would laugh, not fully understanding but loving her passion nonetheless. The days passed peacefully, until one morning the sound of drums broke the calm. Elder Ofor, one of the most respected men in the village, had fallen gravely ill. He was known as the guardian of wisdom, a man everyone trusted. His sudden sickness sent ripples of fear through the community. Whispers filled the air like smoke. "Someone has cursed him," a woman said. "It must be witchcraft," another replied. Fear spread faster than truth ever could. Amara listened to the rumors with a heavy heart. She had seen Elder Ofor just the week before, strong and cheerful, blessing the children at the market. Now he lay weak, unable to speak, his family trembling with worry. The elders gathered beneath the great baobab tree to discuss his fate. The people bowed their heads, waiting for a verdict. No one dared to question what might be said there, for fear of being labeled disrespectful. But as Amara passed by the gathering, she noticed something strange. The chief's son, Duru, standing apart, whispering anxiously to one of the servants. His eyes darted nervously, his hands restless. Amara felt an unease she could not name. Something about his behavior gnawed at her. That night, when the wind howled through the village, Amara couldn't sleep. She sat by the small oil lamp in her hut, her mind restless. She thought about Elder Ofor's illness, about Duru's nervous glances, and about the growing fear spreading among her people. Outside, the wind carried faint voices, the cries of the sick, the mutters of fear, and the whispers of suspicion. It felt as if the village itself was holding its breath. Amara's grandmother used to say, "When truth is buried, the wind will carry its scent." And that night, as the flames flickered before her, Amara knew something was wrong. She didn't know it yet, but the truth she would uncover would not bring peace. It would break her heart. It would turn her own people against her. And it would mark the beginning of a storm that would change Obinze forever. The wind outside rose, carrying with it the faint rustle of dry leaves, a warning that the peace of Obinze was about to be shattered. The days following Elder Ofor's illness were heavy with fear. The once lively songs of the market women grew quiet. Men spoke in low tones, glancing over their shoulders as if the wind itself might be listening. At night no one lingered outside. The moon shone over empty streets, and the dogs howled as if they too sensed something dark approaching. Then one evening, tragedy struck. A child, Ngozi, a sweet little boy of 8, disappeared. He had been sent by his mother to deliver food to Elder Ofor's home, but he never arrived. By sunset, panic swept through the village like wildfire. The drums sounded again, not for celebration, but for alarm. The entire village gathered in the square, their faces lit by flickering torches. Mothers cried, fathers shouted. Fear turned neighbors into enemies. Chief Okoro, the most powerful elder, stood at the center, his voice rising above the noise. This sickness, this missing child, it is not ordinary, he thundered. Someone among us has angered the spirits. The people murmured, desperate for someone to blame. Then, like a storm breaking, the chief pointed a trembling hand toward a frail old widow standing at the edge of the crowd. It is Mama Nene, he declared. She brought this curse upon us. Gasps filled the air. Mama Nene, the quiet woman who sold herbs at the market, who helped mothers deliver their babies, who lived alone since her husband's death. She looked around in disbelief, her hands shaking. No, I would never harm a child, she whispered, her voice trembling. But her words were drowned by the angry cries of the crowd. Witch, someone shouted. She cursed the elder, yelled another. In Obinze, fear spoke louder than truth. And once fear took hold, no voice could stop it. From the edge of the crowd, Amara watched in shock. Her heart raced as she saw the pain on Mama Nene's face. Deep down, something told her this was wrong. Terribly wrong. She couldn't accept that gentle Mama Nene could be capable of such evil. As the chaos continued, Amara slipped away into the shadows, her mind spinning. She knew she had to find answers, not from rumors, but from truth itself. That night, under a pale moon, she walked quietly near the chief's compound. From behind the tall wooden fence, she heard muffled voices. Carefully, she crept closer. It was the chief's son, Duru, speaking in a hurried, fearful tone. Father said no one must know, Duru whispered. The boy wasn't supposed to die. We only meant to scare him, another man hissed. You fool! Now the whole village is in chaos because of you. Amara froze, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded as the truth unfolded before her ears. The missing boy hadn't been taken by witchcraft. He had been a victim of a smuggling deal gone wrong. Duru and his friend had lured the child away, using him to carry a parcel of stolen goods. But something had gone wrong. The boy fell, struck his head, and died. The chief, desperate to protect his only son, had buried the truth beneath lies and fear. Mara's hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes. So this is what they call justice? She whispered to herself. By morning, her decision was made. She couldn't stay silent. Not when an innocent woman was being destroyed. When the villagers gathered again at the square, Amara stepped forward. Her voice, though shaking, carried through the murmuring crowd. Mama Nene is innocent, she cried. It was Duru, the chief's son. I heard it with my own ears. The boy's death was an accident. But the chief hid the truth. The square fell silent. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Eyes widened. The people turned toward Chief Okoro, waiting for his response. The chief's face turned pale, then hardened like stone. His eyes burned with rage. Not of guilt, but of power threatened. You dare to accuse my family? He shouted. You lie to protect that witch. You insult your elders and bring shame to your people. The villagers hesitated. Fear crept back into their hearts. Slowly, the crowd turned on Amara. Whispers turned to shouts. Liar! Traitor! She speaks against the chief. Before she could defend herself, hands grabbed her arms. Someone struck her across the face. Pain flashed white before her eyes. The same people who once greeted her with smiles now threw stones and curses. Through the noise, she saw Mama Nene being dragged away, crying her name. Her small hut was set on fire, flames licking at the sky as the crowd chanted for the curse to be broken. Amara's world blurred through tears and pain. She could hear her brother Chiki crying in the distance, but no one came to help. Her truth had become her crime. As the flames roared and the drums beat like thunder, the voice of Chief Okoro echoed through the night. Let this be a lesson. Those who lie against the elders will face the wrath of the gods. And beneath that dark sky, Amara fell to the ground, bruised, bloodied, and betrayed by the very people she had loved. She did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning of her long road through pain and silence. The dawn after the chaos was eerily quiet. The smoke from Mama Nene's burned hut still curled through the air, like a ghost that refused to leave. Ashes lay scattered across the ground, and with them, the pieces of Amara's broken spirit. Her face was bruised, her hands torn, and her heart heavy with disbelief. The people she had trusted had turned into her tormentors. Her truth, the same truth she had believed would save them, had become the reason for her pain. By midday, Chief Okoro sent men to her home. You are no longer welcome in Obinze, they declared. Take your shame and go. Amara said nothing. Her mother wept silently, pressing a small bundle of food and a tattered shawl into her hands. Her brother Chike clung to her legs, crying, Please, don't go! But Amara knew she had no choice. The eyes that once greeted her with kindness now burned with hatred. The same village that had raised her now cast her out as a curse. She walked away that day with trembling legs, the dust of her home clinging to her feet. Behind her, the drums of Obinze echoed like a warning. Truth has no home here. Exile and isolation, days turned into weeks. Amara walked from village to village, seeking shelter. But stories travel faster than people. Wherever she went, whispers followed. Isn't that the woman who lied against the chief? She brought misfortune to her people. Some offered her food out of pity, but most turned her away. She learned to sleep under trees, to drink from streams, to survive on her own. Her body healed slowly, but her heart carried invisible scars. Sometimes, when the wind blew through the grass, she thought she could still hear Mama Nene's cries and see the flames that consumed her home. But Amara refused to let bitterness take her soul. She found a small settlement far from Obinze, a place where no one knew her name. There, she offered to help teach the children. The village head, a kind man named Bako, saw the light in her eyes and agreed. And so, Amara became a teacher. Every morning, she gathered the children under a tree and told them stories. Stories of courage, of honesty, and of kindness. She taught them that truth, no matter how painful, was a gift. She told them that silence, when born of fear, could destroy lives. The children adored her. To them, she was more than a teacher. She was hope wrapped in human form. But when the day ended and the laughter faded, Amara often sat alone by the fire, tears glistening in her eyes. She whispered prayers for Mama Nene, for the little boy who never came home, and for her village, the one that had chosen lies over light. In her conflict, years passed like flowing water. The seasons changed, and Amara grew into a woman marked by both sorrow and strength. Her face was softer now, but her eyes carried a quiet sadness that never faded. Many nights, she would stare at the stars and wonder if truth was worth the pain it brought. Did I do the right thing? She would whisper to the wind. Was it wrong to speak when silence was safer? But deep inside, her heart answered, You did what was right. The truth may sleep, but it never dies. Still, she dreamed of Obinze, of her brother, of her mother, of the laughter that once filled its streets. She wondered if they were safe, or if they, too, now suffered because of the curse of lies. She missed home, but she could not return. Not yet. The village begins to crumble. While Amara built a quiet life of purpose far away, the village of Obinze began to rot from within. The chief's son, Duru, once arrogant and untouchable, grew more corrupt with power. He took what he wanted, demanded more than was fair, and ruled with greed instead of wisdom. Crops began to fail. The river that once sparkled with fish ran dry. Strange sickness spread through the land. One by one, families began to leave, murmuring that the ancestors had turned their backs. The old people whispered that the gods were angry. "There is a lie buried beneath this soil," they said, "and until it is uncovered, peace will never return." The once proud Chief Okoro aged quickly, his health fading with every year. He became a shadow of the man he once was, haunted by whispers only he could hear. The weight of his secret, the truth he had buried, pressed down on him like a curse. Even those who had once beaten Amara began to speak her name in hushed tones. Perhaps she was right, some said. Perhaps we punished the innocent. But by then it was too late. The damage was done. The guilt was too heavy to bear. Amara's unbroken spirit, one evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Amara sat by her small fire, watching the flames dance. The laughter of children echoed behind her, the same children she had taught to love truth. A tear rolled down her cheek, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from strength. She had lost her home, her peace, and her place among her people. But she had not lost herself. "Maybe," she whispered to the wind, "truth must wander before it finds its home again." And somewhere, far away, as night fell over Obinze, the wind picked up, carrying her words back to the village that once cast her out. It rustled through the dying trees and the cracked soil, whispering to those who still listened. A promise was stirring. A reckoning was coming. The truth Amara had spoken years ago was not dead. It was waiting. Waiting for the day it would rise again and cleanse the village that tried to bury it. The morning the messenger arrived, Amara was tending to her small garden, her hands deep in the red soil she had come to love. The birds sang softly in the baobab trees, and the children's laughter echoed from the schoolhouse nearby. It was a morning like any other, peaceful, ordinary, until she saw the man approach. He was old and thin, his clothes covered in dust, his face weary from travel. He bowed slightly, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Teacher Amara," he said, "I come from Obinze." The sound of that name made her freeze. The air around her seemed to shift. For a moment, the past came flooding back. The fire, the screams, the betrayal. Her hands began to tremble. "What brings you here?" she asked quietly. The man lowered his eyes. "The chief is dying. The elders, they speak of the curse that has fallen upon our land. The river has turned to mud. The children fall sick. The crops no longer grow. They say it is because of the lie we told against you." Amara's breath caught in her throat. For years she had prayed that the truth would find its way back. Now it had. The man continued, his voice thick with shame. "They beg for your forgiveness. The chief, he wishes to see you before he passes." The journey home Amara did not answer right away. She looked out at the horizon, the road she once walked in pain, now calling her back. Her heart battled between fear and forgiveness. After so many years of silence, was she ready to face them again? That night, she sat by her fire, the flames reflecting in her eyes. She thought of Mama Neni's laughter, of her brother Chike's tears, of the village that had turned its back on her. But she also thought of the children she had taught, of the power of truth, of the peace she had found in honesty. When dawn came, she rose, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and began the long walk back to Obinza. The road was familiar, yet foreign. The trees seemed thinner now, the fields barren. She saw cracked earth where once there had been green pastures. The songs of birds were replaced by the cry of crows. As she neared the village gates, people began to gather. They recognized her, the woman they had cast out so many years ago. Their whispers followed her again, but this time they carried no hate, only guilt, only awe. Is that her? The woman of truth? She has returned. Children who had never seen her before peered from behind their mother's wrappers. The elders bowed their heads in shame. Even the wind seemed to pause as Amara walked through the village square, the same place where she had once been beaten for telling the truth. The dying chiefat, the chief's hut. Silence hung heavy in the air. Chief Okoro lay weak and pale upon a mat, his once strong voice reduced to a whisper. Around him, the elders stood like shadows, unable to meet Amara's eyes. When she entered, the chief's eyes flickered open. He stared at her for a long moment, disbelief, regret, and sorrow washing over his face. "Amara," he croaked, his voice breaking. "You came back." She stood still, her expression calm but unreadable. "I did not come for revenge, Chief," she said softly. "I came because truth does not die, even when buried." Tears welled in his eyes. "I wronged you," he whispered. "I wronged our people. I let pride blind me. The gods took everything from me. My son, my peace, my sleep. Every night I see your face in my dreams. Every night I hear your mother's cries." He reached out a trembling hand. "Can you forgive me?" Amara hesitated. The memory of pain still burned within her. But she had learned that forgiveness is not weakness. It is freedom. She knelt beside him and placed her hand over his. "I forgave you long ago," she said gently. "I only pray that your soul finds peace, and that the people learn what truth truly means." A faint smile touched the old man's lips. "Then, maybe Obinze will heal." With that, his eyes closed for the last time. The village's awakening news of the chief's passing spread quickly, and with it, the story of Amara's forgiveness. The people wept, not for the chief alone, but for the years of blindness and cruelty that had poisoned their hearts. One by one, they came to her. The women who had once spat at her feet now knelt before her, tears streaming down their faces. "We believed lies," they said. "We destroyed what was pure. Forgive us." Even the men who had beaten her stood before her, ashamed. "We were afraid," one of them said quietly. "We thought silence would keep us safe." Amara looked at them all and said, "Silence is not safety. Silence is the death of truth." The village gathered that evening in the square, the same place where she had been humiliated years ago. But this time they came not with stones, but with open hearts. A great fire was lit in the center. The elders declared that the truth would no longer be silenced in Obinze. They poured libations to the ancestors and spoke Amara's name with reverence. Redemption. In the days that followed, the village began to change. Rain fell for the first time in months, soft and cleansing. The river swelled once again, bringing life back to the fields. The air felt lighter, the people's hearts freer. Amara visited her old home, now just a patch of earth and a few stones. She knelt and placed her hand on the soil. "Mama," she whispered, "they finally see." Her brother Chike, now a grown man, appeared behind her, tears in his eyes. "I never stopped believing you," he said. "Welcome home, sister," she smiled, the first true smile she had allowed herself in years. The ghosts of her past finally began to fade. That night, as the stars shone over Obinze, Amara stood before the villagers once more. Her voice was steady, her spirit unbroken. "Truth is not our enemy," she said. "It is our guide. It may hurt us, but it will never destroy us, unless we choose to bury it." The crowd bowed their heads in silence. The fire crackled, the night breathed softly, and for the first time in decades, Obinze felt clean again. The morning after the fire of remembrance, Obinze woke to a strange sound, the sound of peace. For the first time in years, the air felt light. The birds sang again. The river murmured gently beyond the fields. The old women who fetched water from the stream whispered that it sparkled as it once had in their youth. And at the center of the village, for Saabreed, people gathered, not in anger or suspicion, but in quiet gratitude. They had called for Amara. The ceremony of apology, the elders had decided that a ceremony must be held. Not for mourning, but for mending. When Amara stepped into the square that morning, the same square where she had once been beaten, the people fell silent. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply looked at her, the woman they had wronged, the truth-teller they had silenced. The new chief, a humble young man named Namdi, stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Amara," he said, "we cannot erase what we did to you. But today, before the ancestors and before our children, we will make it right." He turned to the crowd and raised his hand. "Let the people of Obinze speak their apology." An old woman came first, her back bent, her hands trembling. She had once thrown stones at Amara. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks as she said, "We let fear rule our hearts. We forgot that truth is sacred. Forgive me, my daughter." Then a man approached, the same man who had dragged Amara from her home years ago. He fell to his knees before her, his voice breaking. "I was a coward. I followed lies. I see now the curse was never you. It was our silence." One by one they came. Men, women, even children who had only heard the stories. Some brought gifts of food, some laid flowers at her feet, others simply wept. Amara stood still, her eyes glistening. Each apology felt like a wave washing over her soul, cleansing the wounds that had festered for years. She forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because forgiveness was the only way to set herself free. When everyone had spoken, the new chief turned to her again. "We cannot give you back the years we stole," he said, "but we can give you our respect, our gratitude, and a place in this village that will never again be taken from you." He lifted a carved wooden staff, a symbol of truth and leadership, and handed it to her. "From this day," he declared, "Amara will be the keeper of truth for Obinze." The people cheered. The sound of their voices rose like thunder. Not the thunder of storms, but of rebirth, the cleansing of the land. That evening, a great feast was prepared. The scent of roasted yam, plantain, and stew filled the air. Children ran between the huts, laughing, their joy untainted by the shadows of the past. At sunset, the elders led the people to the riverbank. They carried bowls of clean water and palm leaves. Together, they poured the water into the earth, praying aloud, "May lies never again poison our hearts. May truth always find a home in Obinze. May our children learn from our shame. And may the ancestors forgive our blindness." As the final words echoed through the valley, a cool breeze swept across the river, rippling its surface. The villagers gasped softly. It was as if the earth itself was answering their prayer, and Amara, standing among them, felt the same wind brush against her face, gentle, forgiving, full of promise. Mara's new life, in the months that followed, Obinze flourished. Rain came in plenty. The soil grew fertile again. The people worked together, building new homes, new schools, and new dreams. At the center of it all was Amara. She reopened the small school she had started in exile, but this time It stood in the heart of her village. Children gathered under the shade of a large tree, eager to learn not only their letters and numbers, but lessons of honesty, courage, and compassion. She would begin each day with the same words. "The truth may hurt for a while, but a lie hurts forever," the children repeated them until they became a chant that echoed through the village, a melody of hope that reached even the oldest ears. Her tutorkir, Brother Chiki, helped her build the school's roof. Her mother, now older but proud, sat nearby each morning watching the children play. For her, seeing Amara respected again was a miracle greater than rain after drought. Legacy of truth as time passed. Visitors from nearby villages began to come to Obinze, curious about the story of the woman who had forgiven her people. They called her the woman who spoke light. They came to learn, to seek advice, to hear her story told by the fireside. And every time Amara would smile softly and say, "It is not my story alone. It belongs to every soul that once chose silence when it should have spoken." Years later, when she was old and her hair had turned white like morning mist, she would often sit under the baobab tree, surrounded by her students. They would beg her to tell the story again, the story of how truth fell, but rose again. She would nod, her eyes twinkling. "It was long ago," she'd begin, "in a village where truth was feared. But truth does not die, my children. It waits, sometimes in silence, sometimes in pain, but it always finds its way home." The new dawn one morning, long after Amara's passing, the people of Obinze gathered once again in the square. They had built a tall statue, carved from smooth stone, standing beneath the great baobab. It was of a woman holding a flame in her hand. At the base of the statue were words carved deep into the stone. "Here stands Amara, the keeper of truth. She was beaten for speaking light, but her courage healed a village." The villagers bowed their heads in silence. The wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the sound of distant laughter, soft, eternal. Children ran past, their voices bright, shouting the words Amara had taught them. Truth lives forever. And above them, the morning sun broke through the clouds, warm, golden, forgiving. The people of Obinze smiled as the light touched their faces. It was a new dawn, a dawn born from pain, from courage, and from one woman's unbroken faith that truth, no matter how deeply buried, would always rise again. Years passed, and the world changed around the quiet village of Obinze. New houses stood where old huts once crumbled. Children went to school in uniforms, carrying books instead of baskets. The dusty paths had become smooth roads, and the once forgotten village had grown into a small, thriving town. But among all these changes, one thing never faded: the story of Amara, the woman who had spoken the truth when everyone else was afraid. A visitor comes to Obinze was a warm afternoon when a journalist named Samuel Adeyemi arrived in the town. He had traveled from the city after hearing rumors of a remarkable woman, a teacher whose courage had healed an entire community. He had come seeking a story, but what he found was something deeper. A piece of history that still breathed through the people's hearts. Samuel walked through the busy marketplace, notebook in hand, as vendors greeted him with curious smiles. He stopped by an elderly fruit seller and asked, "Do you know a woman named Amara?" The old woman's face softened instantly. "Ah, our Amara," she said, her eyes glistening. "She saved this village, my son. Without her, we would have been lost in lies forever." She pointed toward a large baobab tree at the far end of the market. "Go there. You'll find her with the children." The teacher, beneath the tree under the broad shade of the baobab, A small group of children sat in a circle, their voices rising in laughter and song. In the center sat Amara, now an old woman with silver hair and eyes that carried both wisdom and peace. Her face had softened with time, her hands lined with years of labor and love. The scars on her back, once symbols of pain, had faded into faint marks that told stories of survival. As Samuel approached, Amara noticed him and smiled warmly. "You've come a long way, traveler," she said gently. "Come, sit. You can learn with us." He sat beside her as the children giggled, curious about the stranger. They were reciting something, their voices clear and proud. Truth never dies, even if buried. Amara nodded with satisfaction and said to Samuel, "That is the lesson they must never forget. When I am gone, they will teach it to their children, and their children's children." Samuel's heart swelled. He turned on his recorder and asked softly, "Mama Amara, will you tell me your story? The one that changed Obinze?" The story, retold, Amara looked at the children around her, then at the vast sky above. "I have told this story many times," she said, "but each time it feels new, because the pain may fade. But the truth always remains." And so she began, her voice steady, gentle, and filled with emotion. She told of Elder Ofor's illness, of Chief Okoro's lies, of the missing child, and of the night when the village turned against her. She spoke of the beatings, the exile, and the long, lonely years that followed. The children sat wide-eyed, their small faces tight with emotion. Even Samuel found himself swallowing hard as her words painted pictures of injustice and resilience. Then her tone softened. She spoke of the confession, of the day she returned, and of the tears that healed instead of hurt. "When they knelt before me," she said quietly, "I realized something powerful. Forgiveness does not change the past, but it can free the heart from it." She smiled faintly and added, "I forgave them not to forget what they did, but to remind them, and myself, that truth is stronger than hate." The journalist's reflection after the lesson ended. Samuel walked with Amara along the riverbank, where the water glimmered under the fading sunlight. He asked her, "Do you ever feel angry about what they did to you?" Amara paused, her eyes following the ripples on the water. "There was a time I did," she admitted softly. "But anger is like fire. It burns the one who holds it more than the one it's meant for." She bent down, picking a white flower that floated by. "Now I only feel gratitude. For the pain that shaped me, for the truth that survived, and for the peace that came after the storm." Samuel nodded slowly, realizing he was not just interviewing a woman, but standing before a living lesson. He asked one final question. "What would you want the world to remember, Mama Amara?" She smiled, a slow, gentle smile that seemed to reach back through the years. "Tell them," she said, "that even when truth is silenced, it listens. It waits. It grows roots in the dark. And one day, it rises again, stronger than before." Legacy of light that night, as Samuel prepared to leave the village, he stood before the tall statue of Amara in the square, the one carved in her likeness, holding a flame in her hand. The moonlight bathed it in a silver glow. At the base of the statue were the words, "She was beaten for telling the truth." But years later, it was that same truth that set them all free. He placed his notebook against his chest, silently thanking the woman who had shown him what real courage looked like. Before dawn, Samuel boarded his bus back to the city. But when his article was published weeks later, it touched hearts across the nation. People wrote letters, visited Obinze, and even started schools named after Amara. Schools that taught not just reading and writing, but the courage to speak with honesty and compassion. Amara became more than a memory. She became a movement. Final reflection. Years later, when Amara's time finally came, she passed peacefully in her sleep beneath the same baobab tree where she had taught countless children. The villagers buried her near the river, the same river that had once carried their tears, and later their forgiveness. On the day of her burial, the wind whispered through the trees, soft, warm, and familiar. Some said it carried her voice. Others said it was the ancestors welcoming her home. The people of Obinze stood together, hand in hand, and repeated her words one last time. Truth may be beaten, but it never dies. And as the sun set over the golden fields, the camera, or the story's gaze, lifted toward the sky. The clouds glowed with the colors of dusk. The wind moved gently through the tall grass. Somewhere in that quiet, a faint whisper echoed, the same whisper that had begun it all. It said, "The truth always returns."